Everybody's talking about GTA 6, Resident Evil Requiem, The Duskbloods, 007 First Light. But what about those games that you should be excited about that maybe you haven't heard of? This is a list of games that are taking creative risk. They're questioning old formulas, they're trying to push the gaming medium somewhere new, or perhaps they're by developers that haven't hit it big in the West yet. If you're a discerning gamer, these are the games you should be excited for in 2026. I know I just said we were going to get into some games you hadn't heard of, but I'm going to start with one you might have heard of, but I'm going to give you some additional reasons to be excited about. And that's the upcoming Victorian steampunk RPG, Clockwork Revolution. This is being published by Xbox Studios and has a ton of money behind it. However, it's being developed by inXile, which is a studio that hasn't done games this big before. They're known for Torment Tides of Numenera, which was a crowd-funded isometric RPG that was the spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, one of my favorite games and definitively one of the greatest narrative experiences of all time in gaming. They also did more isometric titles with Wasteland 2 and 3, and they've been mostly focused on complex game systems and narrative, not necessarily big, flashy titles. This game is being led by the designer Jason D. Anderson, who got his start in games like Fallout 1 and 2, and later served as the creative director of the all-time cult classic game Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. So this guy is really good at making creative narrative decisions around games, which makes me very excited for Clockwork Revolution. Now, inXile, this is going to be their first AAA title ever. So all of their creativity, all of their narrative development is now being backed up in terms of art design and graphics. This game is clearly BioShock inspired from the looks of its combat, its action gameplay, and even its aesthetic looks a lot like BioShock Infinite. But it has some key differences, such as the ability to go back in time, which will, according to the devs, allow you to change the world in the future. This could be changing characters or their behavior, geography or buildings, and the political situation of the game. So you can rewind into the past, make decisions, come back into the present, and the world will have changed. It also has 750,000 words of dialogue so far, so we know we're getting the narrative depth that inXile is known for. This game is really exciting to me, looks like a very cool setting, and takes some of my favorite kinds of games and puts them into a more polished first-person RPG world. Next up, we have a couple of Asian games that may not be familiar to Western audiences. If you like historical games, I'm really excited about Blood Message, a game that's being developed by 24 Entertainment and published by NetEase. This is an action-adventure game with lots of combat, but it also blends stealth and survival, and it takes place in the Tang Dynasty, which is around 800 AD in China. It follows the path of a messenger trying to get back to the imperial capital to deliver a message to the emperor, and it takes place on the Silk Road over a journey of 1,000 or more kilometers. This is something that really happened in the past. It's kind of like the Chinese equivalent of Marathon. No, not the Bungie game. The runner from Marathon who ran to Athens to deliver a message historically. So this game, I think, looks really cool, especially if you're a history buff and want to learn more about Chinese history. And the graphics are absolutely insane. It shows a lot of the features of the Silk Road, including these towering Buddha statues and things that would have been there during the period and indeed are still there today. I think it's going to be a fascinating journey, and the combat looks really compelling, as well as the graphical polish so far. So be sure to check out Blood Message. Another Asian game that's coming out of Korea that is set to be launched in March of this year has now started to get some hype online, and that is Crimson Desert. This is made by Pearl Abyss, who previously made an MMO called Black Desert Online, which was very popular in Asia, somewhat popular in the West, but did make them a ton of money by having tens of millions of active players around the world. Now Pearl Abyss has changed their approach, and they're making a single-player open-world action game that seems almost unfathomably ambitious. First off, the size of the open world is staggering. It is allegedly twice the size of Skyrim and bigger than Red Dead Redemption 2. It's set in the medieval world of Pyrrole, and it has multiple regions, all of which are geologically and artistically distinct. Furthermore, it's built on Pearl Abyss's own engine, which they say will lead to no load times anywhere in the game, even with fast travel, even with flying, which is part of this game. So honestly, from a technical standpoint, it seems extraordinary. The combat looks really compelling, very interactive, very complex. The question really is whether the story is actually going to hold up, because we just got told that in addition to the protagonists they had already announced, there are going to be 2 additional playable protagonists with their own narratives. If they can stick the landing on this game, it may be one of the most important games of the decade. But we'll have to see about that one, because the scope seems absolutely incredible right now. And the question is, did they bite off more than they can chew? Another game that's going to be released in March is Replaced. Replaced is an indie title that some people who have been paying attention have been hyping up for a long time, but it was originally supposed to be released in 2022 and has been delayed for years. But it's finally coming, and here's why you should be excited for it. First off, just look at how gorgeous this game is. It's set in a dystopian 1980s cyberpunk setting, very reminiscent of visuals from films like Blade Runner or the ideas from books like Neuromancer. And it's going to explore those similar themes as well. As we know, the main character is an artificial intelligence called Reach that is trapped within a human body. So we are going to be discussing themes like what does it mean to be human, which are very common in cyberpunk media. Now, this game is an action platformer, but it has combat that was inspired by the Batman Arkham games and platforming that was inspired by games like Prince of Persia. The animations look incredible, so if it can successfully fuse this gameplay with its cinematic aesthetic and its 8-bit stylings, this game could be one of the sleeper indie hits of the year. You can look for Replaced on March 12th. I love narrative games with deep themes, which is why I really enjoyed Thunder Lotus's Spiritfarer, which for me was probably one of the greatest narrative games of the last 10 years. It had very poignant themes about the nature of death and the methods of dealing with grief. And as good as the narrative was, as excellent as the art design was, and as compelling as the world was, I have to admit that the gameplay got a little repetitive and didn't really hold up. However, that may change with Thunder Lotus's new game, At Fate's End. This is an action-adventure game that looks like it has complex combat mechanics, and if it can take what Thunder Lotus has done in terms of emotional storytelling, which it's aiming to because the story is about a character where you're fighting your estranged family members and your family tree is actually your skill tree within the game, so there's some fascinating crossover there in terms of narrative and mechanics that can only happen in a video game. We could be dealing with something special. Certainly the game looks fluid, the animation and aesthetics are beautiful, and I will definitely be playing this one, and it may not be on your radar. So check out At Fate's End sometime in 2026. Speaking of studios with a reputation for narrative games, we can't ignore Don't Nod's new title, Aphelion. Now, Don't Nod previously made the very famous game Life is Strange, which was an excellent narrative experience, but of course didn't have much gameplay. Well, they're trying to change that with Aphelion, because Aphelion features 2 astronauts stranded on an uncharted ice world, with one trying to find the other one, and it contains extensive action sequences that are pretty reminiscent of, say, the environmental platforming from games like Uncharted or the new Tomb Raider titles. I really love this kind of environmental puzzles and leaping from dangerous ledge to dangerous ledge, so this game appeals to me. Plus, I know that Don't Nod can deliver from a narrative sense. So finally, it feels like we may get a really good mixture of compelling action gameplay and puzzle solving, as well as complex storytelling. So check out Aphelion, coming out in 2026. If you're into RPGs, you've almost certainly seen something about the upcoming title, The Blood of Dawnwalker, but I'll tell you some reasons you should be even more excited for this game. First off, the man in charge is named Konrad Tomaszkiewicz. Sorry about my terrible Polish pronunciation. He was the director of Witcher 3 Wild Hunt for CD Projekt Red and the head of production for Cyberpunk 2077. So he has some serious chops in terms of making RPGs. He went to found a studio called Rebel Wolves in Poland, and their first title is The Blood of Dawnwalker. He's taken this freedom to create some really interesting and innovative systems. First off, this game is a vampire game where you are playing a half-human, half-vampire. It has a day-night cycle, so during the day you will be a human, and during the night you will be a vampire. You only have 30 hours to complete the storyline of the game, but it's not in real time. What happens is when you complete a quest or take other actions in-game that tell you the time is being advanced, that's when the time is going to be advanced. So you can explore the world as much as you want. It's about finishing quests and progressing the story that will advance the clock of the game. Furthermore, during the day, you don't have your vampire powers, so the same quests can be solved differently depending on whether you are human during the day or a vampire at night, giving this game significant replayability. Also, past the opening sequence, this game is fully open world, which means you can tackle quests in whatever order you want, you can go wherever you want, and the game apparently still narratively hangs together, which is very interesting, and I can't wait to see how they accomplish this. Also, if you're into history, this game takes a lot of cues. It's an amalgamation of a lot of Eastern European cultures, such as Polish, Romanian, obviously, because there's huge Transylvanian influence on this game. Hungarian, from the Carpathian Mountain region, and they've taken a lot of visual cues from the 14th century, and it's allegedly taking place right after the Black Plague. So there's going to be tie-ins with real history, with real potential places with this game. Even though it's taking place in a fictionalized version, they will be drawing from real architectural and geographic sites for inspiration, as well as the folklore of that region of the world. So this game definitely hands down one of the ones I'm most excited about, given the pedigree of the developer and the ambition of the gameplay. Legendary developer Peter Molyneux is coming out with a brand new God game called Masters of Albion on April 22nd of this year. You probably played games he's made before, like Black and White or any of the Fable series. This game is more or less a synthesis of many of the kinds of games that he's made in the past. It's interesting because Masters of Albion features God game mechanics plus the ability to enter the bodies of one of the heroes within the game to actually have action and combat and fighting that you wouldn't normally have in one of his previous God games. Effectively, you build the world during the day of your village and outfit it with defenses so that at night it is attacked by undead and other enemies that you are defending against, both with your god powers and by inhabiting specific individuals that are inside of your village to fight. This title looks like it's going to be very ambitious in terms of its scope, but if it's anything like Molyneux's historical sandbox god games like Black and White, it could also be incredibly innovative. This is an indie title. He spun off and formed his own studio, 22 Cans, in order to make titles like this. So I'm certainly going to pick this one up just because of its ambition, and it's a title you should be looking at too. We'll finish by talking about a game that has some really chill vibes if you're into laid-back narrative gameplay, and that's Mixtape. Mixtape was delayed from 2025 into 2026. It features some really unique ideas behind the gameplay, even though it's inspired by traditional coming-of-age movies, particularly those from the 80s and 90s. It features a group of friends who are remembering their formative experiences together through a series of vignettes, and they include maybe things like skateboarding or taking pictures or other moments that they shared, but it's all set to a soundtrack from the era. So these include bands like Devo, the Smashing Pumpkins, Susie and the Banshee, The Cure, Joy Division, and so from a perspective of blending music with nostalgia and gameplay, as well as hopefully what's a poignant narrative experience about growing up with your friends, could mean that this game provides a real emotional punch as well as some interesting gameplay. So be sure to check out Mixtape if, like me, you are into games as narratives and who really like the unique inspiration that film can have on games and turning those worlds into interactive experiences. These are the games for discerning gamers in 2026. Be sure to keep on this channel because we will be covering and reviewing many of these titles throughout the year. So be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.